So I'm not backing out on the poll results. I announced several episodes that were coming because of that poll, and they're gonna come probably after Halloween because this is my last video before the big Halloween workload. I prioritized this one because every so often something from an episode pops into my head and makes me laugh. So I go and I rewatch the episode and I realize that nobody ever really talks about this episode despite it being a low-key powerhouse of a season, which in this case is Season 3's Separate Vocations. Separate Vocations manages to pack a lot into its 20-minute runtime. You get a good opening plot, a plot split between Bart and Lisa that's done evenly, a bunch of gags, and a satirical look at the educational system, as well as a parody of cop movies, and a stylized final act, and characters acting uncharacteristic for comedic purposes. In short, this is a stacked episode. Not only that, it doesn't feel like it's being suffocated by its average runtime. It gets everything it needs to get done, and doesn't really skimp or slog or feel incomplete. The first act is a fine satire on how the education system expects you to just know what you want to do with yourself at a relatively young age. At an age where you don't even really know how the world works. Typically this whole thing is more associated with high school, but it starts in elementary and middle school. Now American school in some ways isn't very different from Canadian school. In other ways it's vastly different, but in this case it's still the same basic premise. We didn't do career aptitude tests, but you're pretty much indoctrinated with the mentality that you needed to do well in school so you could get good classes in high school, and then you needed to do well in those high school classes to get into college, university, or a trade apprenticeship. And if you didn't do any of that, you're gonna do bad forever. You're gonna die destitute and nobody's going to love you. Well, I dropped out of high school, got my GED without even studying, and I got into college, which I dropped out of because the sad fact of life is, unless you're getting scholarships or student loans or have parents who can pay for everything, post-secondary education is a scam, and it's kind of a racketeering operation. To any young Canadians that may be watching this channel, my advice to you is, if you want to go to post-secondary school, take a bunch of government loans, finish your schooling, and then leave the country. You won't have to pay back. The whole start of Separate Vocations plotline is that the kids all do a career aptitude test to see what career they would be best suited for based on their test results. There's some pretty funny ones like Ralph,
Salmon Cutter,
Millhouse,
Military Strongman,
Martin,
Systems Analyst, Systems Analyst, Systems Analyst.
Systems analyst.
All right!
Bart and Lisa's is obviously the main plot point, where Bart gets cop and Lisa gets homemaker.
Homemaker?
Mm-hmm. It's like a mommy.
Ouch. Really shows how much time has passed between when this episode first aired and now, because I think if a guidance counselor actually put it like that, he would probably be fired. And with good cause. While it hadn't been presented that Lisa was a gifted child at this point in the show, she was still presented as a brainiac who was intelligent and book smart. It was also established that her musical talent was beyond what would be normal for an 8-year-old. So being told that she's going to be a homemaker, followed by an incident where a music instructor tells her that she isn't suited to be a career jazz musician due to her stubby fingers, Lisa falls into sort of a depression. But on the other end of things, Bart fully embraces the prospect of becoming a police officer, especially when the guidance counselor tells him that's probably his best shot at being anything but a drifter.
Wow, a drifter. Lousy sheriff. Run me out of town. He's lost my vote.
Bart even goes on a ride-along with Eddie and Lou, which segues into a weird, action sequence, and I love how Eddie and Lou are just giving away dirt on the mayor. The one thing about The Simpsons is they're always gonna make their cops look, extra corrupt. I like how they do this, right before the action sequence. Bart's just driving by and you see Snake in a very early appearance robbing Apu, and, nobody even notices until he, literally drives by. Also, I never caught this before. The music that plays during the car chase is the same music that plays in Realty Bites when Homer fights Snake on the car. It's almost like that Snake's, theme. And there's also a joke that would later be sort of recycled in the Springfield Cops scene in Homer's Triple Bypass.
We're in pursuit of a speeding individual driving a red car.
Put out an APB for a male suspect driving a car of some sort.
The whole ride-along scene has some pretty glorious storyboarding and lighting. It's subtle, but it looks pretty good. It's nice, but then the episode just kind of shifts in a bizarre way. Having cornered Snake, the cops give Bart a gun and they all go after him, which I don't think would happen under any circumstances in real life, but the image of Bart walking around with what I imagine is a .357 Magnum is like hilarious. And all of a sudden it just takes this really dark turn. Like as a kid seeing this episode for the first time, because you have to remember, I was maybe cognitively able to absorb what I was watching by the time I was like 7 or 8. It's like I didn't realize that this was like an old episode when I first saw it. You didn't know the difference between new and old episodes up until a certain age. But seeing the scene for the first time, I was like, what the f***? This whole thing is just so out of pocket. The fact that Snake is willing and capable of killing Bart. Like, he's about to just run over a 10-year-old with his car, and he's, like, laughing.
See you in hell, punk!
And then the whole, like, thing with the title card after the commercial break is so bizarre, and it's easily an early example of the show transforming from its primetime sitcom roots into the more zany show that it would become during its 4th season. This whole sequence of events is just batshit insane, and I absolutely love it. It's almost like a fever dream, and quite frankly, I would not have it any other way. And of course, Bart doesn't get run over. Snake gets seriously injured due to the narrowing of the alleyway, and Bart is sold on his new future as a police officer, even being made an honorary deputy by Chief Wiggum.
Sir, I know what I want to be when I grow up. A cop.
But on the Lisa end of things, it's a lot more down to earth as you would expect from Season 3. She becomes more discouraged and depressed due to being told that she won't be able to do what she wants to do with her life, and as a result, she starts to act out. The start of this is her hanging out with the bad girls of Springfield Elementary, who I don't think ever really appeared again after this outside of maybe a few crowd shots. It's a shame because they did other things with Lisa, dealing with girl bullies, and these two would have fit the bill for those roles pretty well, although their design is very 80s and probably would have looked out of place in the later episodes. But nevertheless, the two bad girls start to influence Lisa after she recommends they vandalize Skinner's Puma Pride shrine. Which is funny how Puma Pride is like this weird recurring thing with Springfield Elementary and Skinner. This is just a classic role reversal episode, a very common subject in comedy shows. Lisa goes down a path of rebellion.
Lisa, you're not sprinkling your sparkles.
Shove it.
While Bart starts to go down a path of authority, having groundskeeper Willie arrested, and leading to what I believe is the first story where Skinner and Bart peacefully coexist, and even kind of become friends, something that would later be revisited in Sweet Seymour Skinner's badass song. The whole plotline with Bart and Skinner is clearly a play on those cop movies of the 70s and 80s, with Skinner playing the role of a police chief and Bart being a heroic police officer, or in this case, hall monitor. I think the dynamic here is really great, and it's nice to see them interact in an amicable way, but you know, it's funny, when watching this, it reminds me of a movie that came out a few years ago titled Brick, which is funny because that movie was directed by the same guy who did The Force Awakens, and like every time somebody stands up for this guy, they're like, oh, Brick was pretty good. Bro ripped off a Simpsons episode. And you're probably asking, what am I implying by saying this? What I'm implying is that that gentleman is none other than a no good hack. Seeing Lisa take on the role of troublemaker is actually very entertaining. It's a side of Lisa we do get to see from time to time, but never as good as it was done here. Not to beat a dead horse, because I bring this up anytime I can in my Simpsons reviews, but the Lisa character, even when she was annoying or in a very schmaltzy episode, was like 100 times more tolerable when she acted like an actual kid rather than a voice of reason or a soapbox to the writer's political views. And this isn't me being like, oh, I disagree with the political views, therefore I hate the character. It's like, I just don't care. That's the thing. Like, sure, she was always somewhat of a moral compass and a voice of reason, but she was also still a kid, and this allowed her to make mistakes and fall into this territory more, which in turn made the character more compelling on the screen. Lisa's descent into being a bad girl is fun to watch, whereas Bart becoming an authoritarian figure in the school is also very fun to watch. It's a rare occurrence where the A and B plots of an episode not only coexist well, but synergize with each other. Each one is subsequently more entertaining because of the other one. It's funny, and I absolutely love how Bart, under the right circumstances, can take a school that is completely out of line and turn it into a police state where even the bullies are afraid to act out.
Hey, Louis, watch this. Ow! Bart, do something!
Let's go, Millhouse.
Sure, we have order, but at what price?
It speaks on my theory that under the right circumstances, Bart is as smart, if not smarter, than Lisa. As Bart's authoritarian rule takes over the school, Lisa continues to be at odds with authority figures such as Miss Hoover.
Lisa, if you'd bothered to do the assignment, you'd know the answer is the Battle of New Orleans. I mean, Andrew Jackson.
Well, you're earning your 18 grand a year.
And eventually she steals all the Teacher's Edition books to kind of get back at him. And I actually love how The Simpsons doesn't really give into all that dick riding that elementary school teachers get. Like, I've noticed this trend on social media where, people are like, oh, teachers need more money because they work hard. And it's like, why? A computer program could do what elementary, middle, and even some high school teachers do. I really hate the public school system and elementary school teachers in particular due to my poor experiences with them, but that's a topic for another video. All I really have to say is, yeah, a lot of teachers don't actually know the answers to what they teach. They just have an answer key or a book, and all they're required to do is read it and maybe do some basic shit to help us understand it. So Lisa pulls this ultimate prank by stealing all the teacher editions, throwing the school into disarray. Bart and Skinner eventually deduce that the books are in the school, and we get a cool little montage of them searching lockers set to a slightly altered version of Axel Foley's theme from Beverly Hills Cop. And this slaps, the original slaps obviously more, but this one, which is slightly altered, really displays the talent of Alf Clausen, especially in his first few years on the show where he was able to get creative and they didn't just use stock music that he made. In the end, Bart figures out it's Lisa. But after being a by-the-book authoritarian the entire episode, Bart has a change of heart and decides to take the fall, knowing full well that Lisa is smart enough to do whatever she wants, and that having this on her record could destroy her entire life, whereas Bart having this on his record really wouldn't do too much. So Bart does what is the right thing and takes the blame for Lisa in order to save her from turning into a delinquent like he was. And honestly, that's the beauty of this episode. The roads wind around each other a bit before the status quo is preserved, but it's not preserved in a cheap way. Seeing Bart take the fall for his sister, it shows that Bart and Lisa's relationship is complex but positive. At the end of the day, Bart does not want Lisa to go down the same road that he's gone. And additionally, one can interpret that this episode actually does sort of kick off one of the few long-running story elements of the show. Yeah, it's kind of funny. You jump forward to the season 4 episode, the Itchy and Scratchy movie, and it's prophesized that if Bart can stay on the right track, he will become Chief Justice of the Supreme Court. Well, that little element was established in that episode and was sparingly referenced in future episodes. We get to see Bart's first little taste of authority in Separate Vocations. His career aptitude test pegging him as a police officer is kind of foreshadowing, because a police officer is a job that could very well lead to bigger things in law enforcement and the legal system. So the whole Chief Justice of the Supreme Court thing was low-key prophesized in Separate Vocations. Whereas Bart telling Lisa that she can be whatever she wants when she grows up could possibly be leaning towards the fact that she becomes the president later. It's very easy to label Separate Vocations as a major developmental moment both for the characters of Bart and Lisa, which makes me shocked that this episode kinda just flies under the radar within the Simpsons community. But aside from giving us some great character moments and development, the episode is actually really funny. It's filled with both visual and dialogue gags, delicious satire that remains relevant in the modern day against the education system and law enforcement, and its animation and storyboarding is excellent. And it doesn't shock me that the animation and everything is great in this episode, because season 3 was the last season to be done by Klasky Supo, who pound for pound in terms of 90s animation are unmatched. This episode is so well crafted in every conceivable way with the writing and the animation and everything that I couldn't find any flaws if I tried. The only flaw I guess one could note is that Homer and Marge really don't get much to do, but Marge still gets one of her most memorable flashback scenes. But the one perceived flaw that one could give it is pretty easily forgivable when you remember that this is still during the Bart Mania era. Bart was the franchise character of the show at this point in time, so naturally most episodes were going to be based around him. But on top of that, it's a Lisa episode that lets Lisa actually be a kid and have a good storyline about being a kid in school with her brother. And I like that as bad as Lisa starts acting, she still refuses to smoke.
I'll smoke it in class.
Whoa!
It's safe to say that the writers and animators were operating at a level they rarely operate at consistently when they created this episode. So honestly, this might shock some people, but when factoring in all the straight up qualities that Separate Vocations brings to the table, I have no choice but to give it a 10 out of 10. It's quite possibly the most under the radar 10 out of 10 in the series. Even if I factor out all the foresight bits, it's still just a great episode using an age-old convention in sitcoms, i.e. the role reversal aspect. Role reversal is always fun because it lets characters go out of their comfort zone, and characters acting out of their comfort zone is always a good watch.
Bart Simpson on the side of law and order? Has the world gone topsy-turvy?
But just everything else on top of that, the jokes and the story, is like done at maximum efficiency. This is an episode I didn't even really learn to appreciate until recently. Like, I never watched it with an analytical mindset. I never looked into any of the writing or production value aspects. It was just a random episode that I remembered a funny part from, decided, hey, that would make a decent Simpsons and Me episode. And I watched it, and to my shock, I was so thoroughly enamored with every aspect of this episode that I had to give it a 10 out of 10. And I will die on the hill that this is a 10 out of 10 episode. And I don't see like any noteworthy YouTubers talking about this episode, and I really do think they should. I think it deserves another look. It didn't even make it into the Real Jim's top 10 season 3 episodes or the honorable mentions. And quite frankly, I don't know if the Real Jim's has ever given me time of day or if he's even aware that I exist, but if he's to somehow come across this video, I am like demanding an extra seconds review. So that was my review of Separate Vocations, an episode that I absolutely love now. It's like top 5 season 3 episodes, maybe even top 3, and it could probably take a run at the #1 spot with some deliberation. Though I haven't decided if this is going to be the last video before my Halloween series comes up, so with that being said, like, subscribe, and Halloween season is coming up, so stay tuned.
Ooh, they used nylon rope this time. It feels so smooth against my skin.